Hello and welcome to the first part of the optional pieces for module number 5. There are two optional pieces here. The first one, which is designated as iteration 5, is managing some of the contacts or managing the list of contacts. In particular, we will look at deleting a contact and reordering contacts. The second part, which we will do in a follow-up iteration, is saving contacts to a file. So with respect to where we are, we completed the required parts, iteration 1 through 4. And in this iteration 5, the extra credit or optional will learn how to delete and reorder the contacts inside the list. So in the follow the app development process, we have the problem formulation as a step 1, solution formulation is step 2, and solution implementation is step 3. In the problem formulation, there are 3 steps. First, do some research on the problem at hand or the similar apps which we've done in iteration 1. But in here, since this is the first time to work on the reordering and managing, we might do some research to learn a little bit about the table view controller and how it manages the list. Then we define the scope and do the testing. So if we look at the table view controller guide, and this is linked from Blackboard if you are taking the class, or you can go to the Apple Developer website or Google Apple Developer Table View Guide, Table View Programming Guide, and you will find the Table View Programming Guide for iOS. There is some introduction and others, and the 2 sections that we are interested in is the insert and delete. We've done the insert in adding new contact in iteration 3. So we're looking at the deletion and the reordering of the rows, which are these 2 items on the left. There are some good read here. Some of you have wrote that you would like to know some theoretical foundation, so reading this document will give you that theoretical foundation on this process. Notice that the table view controller, there is the table view, it is layered. There's the controller, the table view cell, the content view, and then any other user interface components. So these operations, the reordering and the delete, are managed at the table view layer. This is the layer that manages the list. And the table view controller has a data source and a delegate. And the data source manages the different operations related to the data that come to the table view, and the delegate manages some of the actions. The table view controller comes automatically set as the controller, as the delegate and the data source for the table view that it houses. This diagram in this document is very important, as it shows you the different operations, the different steps that the table view, the sequence of the steps to insert or delete a row. The way the sequence diagram is read, there are these columns. Each one of them represent an object or a variable of a library type. So this is what the client does, which is the initial interactions or the events that the client generates. And this is the table view, which is the list that you see. This is the object that's serving as a delegate to the table view. In our case, this is the table view controller. And this is the data source, the object that is serving as the data source for the table view, which in our case is also the controller. Don't mix this with the contact data source in our particular solution. The contact data source manages the contacts. The data source for the table view managing the feed of the data to the table view. So it has some functions as a delegate of as a data source of a table view that it has to implement, like the number of sections, the number of rows, and other functions here like commit, editing style, and so on. So the timeline goes from top to bottom. So the way you read this is you read each horizontal line represent an interaction that is taking place, and then if you want to know what actually happens, you start reading from the top to the bottom. So the very first horizontal line is a line linked to the table view, indicating that the beginning of an editing step happens at the table view with the user generating something. So the user presses an edit button. Um, Once the user presses an edit button, it sets the editing of the table view to true, and then the table view then asks the data source a question by calling a function, can edit row at index path. So when the user presses an edit button and goes to one of the rows to try to edit it, the table view grabs the index path, which is a combination of the section number and the row number, and asks the data source, is this row editable? If the data source returns yes, then the table view goes to the delegate and say, editing style for row at index path, and then the delegate returns the editing style, which could be a delete or something, or insert something like that. Then the user presses the delete, for instance, and once the user makes the choice of the editing style that's available, then the table view contacts the data source and say commit the editing style. And in this case, for this particular row, if the user said delete, then the data source will execute this function, delete row at index path, or insert row at index path. Here we'll delete row at index path, and when the user deletes row at index path, then that removes the row from the table view. For our case, since we have a contact data source that manages that list, when the user on the delete row at index path from the table view, we also have to delete it from our contacts list. So there are two removals. We need to remove it from the list, that's the table view, which is the list that the user is seeing. We need to remove it from the data source that we have as well. Similarly, if you scroll down, there is a similar view for the reordering. Not scroll down, we need to click on the reordering, and that tells you the sequence for the reordering of a table. It follows the similar logic. User this edit, and then they indicate they want to move the table, the row. The table view asks the delegate if the row can be moved. If so, then the user will drag the reordering controls, which are these ones, and then the table view will ask the delegate that the user would like to target this row, and the delegate can say yes or no, and then the table view will talk to the data source and say move the row. The moving an item from one row to the other, basically switching the order of the two items. So one will take place of the other, and we need to switch that order both in the table view so that you can see it, and in the data source as well. And that's what we will do. So this document, both at the deleting row and on the managing reordering, can give you some background on the two operations that we need to do. So after we understood a little bit what need to happen, what's our scope is to user can delete a contact from the list and reorder contacts in the list. And to test it, it's very straightforward. We'll choose a contact and then delete the contact and make sure it's no longer available. And then we will reorder different contacts. So in the solution formulation, we're going to be dealing with contact. We're going to be dealing with contact list. And all of these are already there and modeled already. So no changes in the model. In the view, we will be dealing with the list of contacts in the table view, and this is already created, so no changes in the view. All the changes we're doing here will be happening in the controller as well as the data source actually. The contact data source will also, so I might in fact add something here. The contact data source will also need to implement delete contact at index and switch contacts from one index to the other. So these two functions need to implement these two operations on the list of contact on the NS mutable array that we have, so that when we implement in the controller the remove feature, we will have to call the delete contact in the contact data source, and when we implement the move feature, then we implement the switch, will call the switch contacts from the data source. So we will implement, so we need to from the controller activate the edit button. So we can add that here actually. Activate the edit button. Implement the edit and move features, can edit, can move, and commit editing style, and move row, and then make them call the data source, the switch function and delete function. And then we run the app and test it. So this concludes iteration number 5. So let's go ahead and implement that.